In days after the patrolling agreement between India and China, disengagement at the LAC has already begun. We're given to understand that it would be completed by the 28th of this month. Let me just quickly take you through the details that we know so far. In fact, both sides, they have started disengaging, and that is in small batches, particularly in two areas, that is in Depsang as well as Demchok, which is in eastern Ladakh. In fact, we're being told that this would be completed by the 28th after the multiple rounds that both sides, both diplomatically and military level talks that they've had. The final agreement was basically signed by the senior highest military commanders. Let me also take you through some of the bone of contention right now is with regard to the graziers who will also be allowed to graze their cattle in areas that were earlier declared as buffer zones. And this too would be coordinated. So essentially both sides are now going back to the position that they were back in the year 2020. In fact, it is happening as per the agreed terms in terms of the percentage of what has to be dismantled and when the troops have to be pulled back. So effectively, the disengagement has already begun in Demchok. However, that clarity not coming in terms of the areas that they are coming out of, particularly in Demchok. Remember, it was this same very area where a tent was basically removed earlier. This was after the agreement that was signed by both sides. Now, what happens next? We are being told that patrolling would basically restart at all the patrolling points the two sides used. That was back in April 2020 before the tensions began. So that's a big breakthrough if you see in terms of the patrolling. So they go back to their initial position of 2020. So far in the last few years, after what we witnessed in Galwan, remember, in fact, both sides, they were patrolling not just in Depsang and Demchok, but also the northern banks of Pangeng So, also in Gogra hot spring area. This is, remember, in the Galwan Valley. Now, these are the areas too we are being told that the patrolling will resume, which was exactly what the position was back in April 2020. Now, let me try and explain this to your viewers in terms of what the patrolling will entail, and that would essentially be pretty much what we saw back in 2020, particularly in the northern banks of Pangeng So, where India's claim basically is still about finger 8. And the actual patrolling used to be carried out till finger 4. So that's exactly how it's going to look like if you see the disengagement and the patrolling. General G.D. Bakshi is joining us on this broadcast. General Bakshi, as far as going back to 2020 status quo, this undoubtedly is a big move. Going back to what we witnessed, particularly in areas like the northern bank of Pangeng So, as well as Gogra, the disengagement we are now being given to understand would be completed by the 28th or 29th.
Exactly. Like I said, this is the beginning of the thaw. It's not the thaw itself, but it is a very pleasant and a very happy beginning of the thaw between the two nations. China has agreed to status quo ante. That was our demand right throughout. We want the condition restored to what it was before the 2020 Chinese uncalled for, unexpected intrusions. So this is the first step. We'll see how it goes. It seems to be progressing quite well so far. And based upon that will come the restoration of trust. Trust that has been broken doesn't come back so easily. It will take time to build trust. But this is a welcome first step. Like the Chinese say, a 10,000 li journey starts with a single step. The simple fact is that after we have disengagement, then we can have de-escalation and then de-induction. These are the markers, the long path to restoration of normalcy. But we have taken the first steps, and that is a very welcome sign. It is a welcome sign that India has also given that in case other countries react in a very hostile manner to India, India will do everything to safeguard its national interests.
General Bakshi, a quick question with regards to whether you can really trust the Chinese. A similar sort of breakthrough was back in the year 2018 too, in terms of the patrolling agreement. We saw what really happened thereafter after the visit of the Chinese president to India. So can you really take all of this at face value? Because if at all you are basically removing them from the patrolling points, does that make us look a little vulnerable?
Look, the history of stabs in the backs, volte faces goes back not to now. Goes back to the 1950s. It goes back to so many things, assurances that were given and then violated with contempt. So the history of mistrust has a long, long legacy. But the simple, and then the worst mistrust, the worst stab in the back was 1962 invasion itself. So we have a long history of ups and downs, but we also have phases in which, the Chinese had their build your strength, bide your time kind of a scenario in the Deng Xiaoping era, in which both the countries for about 2 decades plus almost had normalized things on the border, and that had helped us to pull out formations from the northeast and use them in J&K where the heat was high. So we have had also, what shall I say, realpolitik based, attentes or periods of quiet when both the sides felt the need to lower the heat on their own borders and concentrate on their own tasks. Hide your capabilities, bide your time was the Deng Xiaoping phase, in which we did have a modus vivendi of sorts for 20 years plus. And that was the one that was violated in 2020 in Ladakh by the Chinese. So we'll have to wait and watch, trust, but verify.
Well, that's the key factor right now between both the countries, whether at all that trust deficit